Well, folks, just over the weekend, the Washington State Legislature wrapped up, and I've got a great conversation now with State Senator Drew MacEwen here representing the 35th. Good morning, Drew.
Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
Good, and it's got to be, well, I don't know how it is actually. Why don't you tell me what you think of how the session ended just on Sunday afternoon? All the budgets apparently came together, and the governor signed them, and you guys wrapped things up. You heard that final gavel.
Yeah, well, he's got the governor has 20 days to sign everything, so we've done our part. The legislature's done its part. I was a no, but I
Uh-huh.
think we could have done much better. Um, you know, I will say it was probably one of the most frustrating sessions I've ever had. Look, I know on the Republican side, we're in the minority. I get it. We're not going to get all that we want, but I have never seen the majority party act this way, where I mean it was a complete shutdown of the minority voice. I mean, we saw that actually with rules that were changed in the House. On the Senate side, I mean they didn't do that to us, but the as I said on the Senate floor on the final passage of the budget, that if you truly want to have a bipartisan budget, and again I acknowledge the majority is going to get mostly what they want, but if you truly want to have a bipartisan budget as you claim you do, then that would entail having yes votes from both caucuses, but not only that, no votes from both caucuses. And when you've done that, you've hit the mark. And we've had budgets like that in the past. And this just fall short. I mean, it relies on $10 billion dollars in new taxes. It's put more and more pressure on businesses, whether it's unemployment insurance now for striking workers, or doubling of liquor fees, increasing other fees across the board. This is probably the most regressive tax and fee session I've ever seen, and it felt to me that it was a session of let's throw every tax we can think of up on the wall and see what sticks through the end. And most of them did. I mean, they didn't even in their ways in the Senate Ways and Means Committee in passing out the taxes last week to the Senate floor. They didn't even make a yes argument in the committee for their own tax increases. They just called for the vote. And I just find that extraordinary, that you won't even make the case for making $10 billion in new taxes. So it was frustrating. We're going to see what the governor does here. He said that taxes should be the last resort, and he was very clear in his inaugural address about that we've got to look at spending cuts. I don't feel that this budget really took a serious look at where it can save money. And the governor now has the choice. I mean, he can sign the budget and all the taxes and walk away. And I feel that if he does that, he's going back on his word. Um, or he can veto some or all of the tax increases. The struggle he has in is that constitutionally we're required to have a balanced budget. We can't operate like the federal government does. So if he vetoes some or all of the taxes, he's not going to veto all the taxes. That's a delusional thought for my conservative friends. But he might veto some of them. And if he does that, he's got to be able to offset that revenue then with spending cuts in the budget. And under the veto powers in our state that the governor has, he doesn't have a line item veto, but he can veto sections. So I think what you're going to see over the next 2 weeks, he's not going to rush and sign this anytime soon. They're going to take a hard look, the governor's office that is, on the budget. And are there sections that they can veto that will reduce the spending, and then he can then subsequently veto perhaps some of the tax increases? It's going to be a tough to do. I mean, when you've got $10 billion in new taxes, I mean, sure, he could probably find, I think, arguably 500 million to maybe 1.5 billion that he could realistically veto out of the budget without causing major damage. But that's hard pressed to see. The other scenario in all of this is, and this would be my preferred scenario, is that he vetoes all the taxes and then calls a special session back to fix the budget. And we have till June 30th. I believe that would be the fiscally prudent thing to do. I have no desire to be in special session again, but it'd be the right thing to do. And that's the approach that I would advocate for. I don't hold a lot of hope that that will be the case, and we'll see what happens. But I mean, the reality is, I'm just astonished at what occurred here in this last week. I mean, the this gets a little wonky, but for those that followed, the McCleary lawsuit with education, the one of the big things there was the inequitable funding that occurred between rich districts and poor districts,
Right.
and they passed a property tax levy equalization bill that basically takes us back to pre-McCleary for that to happen again. So you have that occurring. Again, tremendous increases in taxes on businesses. And let's be fair. People think that businesses will just absorb that. No, they don't. I mean, a lot of businesses operate on very thin margins. So what happens? That tax increase gets passed on in the price of their product or service, and we as consumers are the ones that end up ultimately paying that through a higher fee. And then you've got an increase in the gas tax and registration fees. I mean, there was no relief provided to the working class citizens of the state in this entire legislative session, and that's very unfortunate. And I think that people are unfortunately going to feel that pain here over the subsequent years.
I was reading some articles written in the after the session ended and some of the kind of talking headlines about some of the things. You and your party kind of estimating that these taxes and these packages that went through could cost a family maybe roughly $2,000 a
Yeah,
year in additional
correct.
taxes and increases. Where where are folks going to likely see that when it comes down to they're at the kitchen table paying their bills and things?
Property taxes,
Okay.
that'll be a part of that because you're going to see it alleviated some of the cap limits on local property taxes. They'll certainly see it there. They're going to see it through increased prices on the products and services they utilize, as I mentioned before, because of that pass through that's going to happen.
Right.
Um, they're going to see it at the gas pump. They're going to see it when they renew their car registration. There's a whole host of things, and yeah, that is our calculus. It's about $2,000 per family that they'll see. It's not going to happen overnight, but I'd say over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, that's the reality. And just doing back of the envelope math, I mean that's a little less than $200 a month, and
Yeah.
in additional taxes. So, and again, districts like mine, where I mean, largely working class families, there's not a lot of leeway in folks' family budget, and this makes it even tougher to weather any storm. And the other to me the other atrocity in this budget is the ending fund balance is I don't recall the exact figure. It's north of $200 million, which is certainly a heck of a lot of money to you and me, but it is nothing in the context of a $78 billion budget.
Sure.
But to put that in perspective, excuse me, the median family income in Washington State is right around 80,000. It's a little less in Mason County, but that's the equivalent of using that median income. That would be the equivalent of a working class family having $200 in their savings account to weather an emergency. That's what this state budget has done with its quote savings account. We would blow through that so fast if there is so much as one little hiccup
Yeah.
in revenue projections.
That gas tax taking start on the 1st of July, about 6% per gallon. Do you think or have you seen anywhere where folks in the 35th may feel, I mean, they'll feel it at the gas pump, but will they see any benefits in the 35th from that tax, from that
Yeah,
hike?
we've kept the Belfair bypass, now called the freight corridor. We've kept that on track, so that is still moving along. Also, we've got going to get a roundabout finished at Wallace Neyland.
Yeah.
That's going to help. So there's certainly some direct things there. Unfortunately, those don't happen real quickly. And again, but I'm glad that that's a tough thing to do when you're advocating for projects knowing that you're not going to support the final transportation package. And I couldn't in good conscience, but I will give credit to Senator Leas, the Democrat chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, fully recognized I wasn't going to support things on final passage, but he and I don't see eye to eye on the social issues in the state. But I think fiscally he's middle of the road and acknowledges that the concerns of my district, and that while I can't support these things on final passage, he's still willing to listen to me and advocate with me I'm making sure these projects are maintained in the 35th. So I'm grateful for that, and that's the advantage I think of being in the legislature for a period of time. You can build up those relationships, and even when you're no on a final passage, you can still get things in there that your district needs. So I'm glad for that, and certainly a hat tip to Representatives Griffin Couture. They were instrumental in that as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna leave the kind of the education questions about the session to Reps Griffin Couture because we've talked about that most throughout. That's kind of been our through line throughout. Let's talk a little bit about this cap on the rent increases,
Yeah.
7% plus inflation with a max of 10%, capping this thing. Some folks say tenant relief, some say rent control. How do you think that is going to impact the 35th?
Well, negatively, I mean, it sounds, and actually, the final bill that passed is 5% plus
Hmm.
CPI. So they even lowered that threshold in the final version.
Okay.
Yeah, and so if people weren't following along, what this does is it limits how much rent the landlord can change on you when you're in your home or apartment on an annual basis to 5% plus inflation. On the surface, that sounds wonderful, right? I mean, and look, I think we all agree. I mean, rents have skyrocketed in the state. There's no question on that. And are there some landlords that are bad landlords and would increase at every opportunity they can and take whatever they can get from it? Yeah, there are people like that, unfortunately. But by and large, I don't believe that the majority of people are. But let's look. And I said this on the Senate floor. We never turn around and look what's driving the increase. Everybody owes their property tax this week, the first half of their property taxes this week. Look at that increase from last year. Look, if a landlord has to pay those property taxes, it's built into your rent. And those have skyrocketed tremendously over the last couple of years. Look at if you're a homeowner, look at your insurance. I know our insurance, we changed carriers. I mean, just to get the cost down a little bit. That has skyrocketed. Why did insurance go up so much? Well, insurance companies have been driven out of the market in Washington State by a number of reasons. One of them being, we changed the rules on law enforcement a few years ago. Property crime skyrocketed. There's a real cost to that. There's other mitigating factors, of course, in there, but the bottom line is then you have utility costs. I mean, we're heading down the path of can only have quote unquote clean energy, and not, so we're going in that direction. There's an increased cost on that. All these things add in, right? And landlords cannot absorb all that. What I feel you're gonna see happen, and I've already seen this. I have a number of constituents that have shared this with me, where maybe they saved up enough money, bought a single family home that they used to rent out, or they were fortunate enough to be able to move into a new home and keep their old one and rent it out. And they're not making much on it. It's kind of a long-term retirement proposition for them. They can't withstand already before this bill passed the changes that were happening, and I've heard from a lot of people like that have sold. So that's on the spectrum of people that I would say are not professional real estate types, right? They're already saying, "I'm done, I'm out. This is not worth it." But let's take a look at the other end of this, where you have people companies that build multifamily housing, do massive projects that are millions and millions of dollars. I heard specifically from one of those in Kitsap, and which is part of the 35th, that they've had three funding deadlines for three different projects. One of them was last week that got funded. Another one is in 2 days. The other one is in mid-May. This is from a national lender. When the governor signs this, that's a material change in the lending conditions, and they will lose that funding. And this is for multifamily housing in the Bremerton area. That's reality. And I don't think the writers of this legislation understand that concept, that there is a risk factor that lenders take on. And so, it certainly has put a project, an upcoming project just in the Bremerton area in jeopardy for multifamily housing. We don't have enough units in our state. And one of the reasons rent is so high is because that supply and demand is so out of whack. So again, I'm very frustrated by this process. We never look at all the things the legislature has done in the past to make housing so unaffordable. Instead, we try to artificially cap things, and it's going to do the exact opposite. I've got a good friend of mine, grew up together. We were great friends through junior high and high school. He ended up moving out to New York City. Typical middle class family, and I mean, he shared with me New York City's got rent caps, and you don't see repairs happen in those situations because it doesn't pencil out. You get buildings that degrade, and what he said the common thing is for most middle class people in New York City is yeah they rent a subpar apartment or whatever in New York, and then they what their hope is that you make enough money that you can buy a vacation place in the Adirondacks or upstate New York, whatever, and that's where you build your
Oh
real
yeah.
estate wealth. That's been the reality for those that can are able to do that. And obviously, that's a situation that doesn't work for a lot of families, but that's what the goal is for people that live in New York under this rent cap structure. So, I mean, those are real life examples that are out there, and why we choose not to see what's happening is just flabbergasting to me.
Is there any concern voiced too that with the tight numbers of rental properties out there for families or whatever, if these conditions continue to rise and folks can't, do the repairs or whatever, that they just take them off the rental market and turn them into short-term rentals for people to do Airbnbs and stuff, and that even further squeezes the housing
Yeah, I think that's
market?
a valid point. I hadn't really thought about that. That's certainly a scenario. I mean, the one I pointed out here at the beginning of this was, people that end up just selling, saying I'm done, and they sell their single family residence that was a rental. And typically when they do that, it goes to somebody that's buying it as a home, right? And
Yeah.
so, but it removes one more from the rental market. But you're right. I mean, yeah, that's a valid point. You could see that scenario as well, where people say, all right, let's just go to short-term rentals. And I mean, again, you're displacing more people then and exacerbating the problem. I mean, the reality is this notion in Olympia that that people that own a rental property, just have unlimited deep pockets is just it's false, and I don't understand why they they don't see that. I mean, are there some people in that situation? Sure, but by and large, the people that I know that are fortunate enough to own some rental properties, I mean, it's you're almost penciling it out to zero on your rental income versus the
Right.
expenses, and you end up where the idea is you make money when you ultimately sell it, down the line, and so you gotta wait that out, and but this I think is going to push that time frame up considerably for a lot of people.
Well, I want to
So
ask you even more
yeah,
questions here as we move through, but I want to hold them because we have got ourselves a legislative wrap up coming up on May 14th
yep,
with the Mason County EDC, where I'm actually doing this interview now. The gang here has put this together in conjunction with our community credit union, Peninsula Credit Union, also the Shelton Mason County Chamber, the county, and the North Mason Chamber. So we're all going to gather together on the 14th at Public Works for Mason County. The program starts at 7. Tees is going to provide breakfast starting at 7:30, and we'll have a good opportunity to talk about some more topics too, including public safety and gun policy, maybe some district-related bills, and moving forward in things. You mentioned that there, the governor has a couple weeks now to sit on this and think about it before he signs, or there's other options. So if things change, of course, we'll try to get you back. But I know you're in the upper echelons now at the state senate, so you're a busy man when it comes to these types of things, getting the nuts and bolts moving together. But really appreciate the time and kind of pretty wild session from an outsider's perspective, especially after hearing that first volley from the newly minted governor to go back from tell his
yeah,
party to go back and try to figure out some different ways to move forward with this. We'll see how it all, I guess, shakes out finally once he signs things. But
yep.
pretty interesting start to his tenure in the state capitol.
It is. It is. And he was interesting. He had a press availability the other day, and he said he's been careful in criticizing his predecessor, but for the first time, I think he came the closest to that when he said, "Yeah, I was handed a big bill."
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, it's going to be interesting here as we continue on this 108-day session, just wrapping up on Sunday with the final passages of the three budgets, the capital, transportation, and the state operating budgets there. Some 1,300 pages or something like that when it comes
yeah,
down to it. I know, Drew, you've read every single one of those.
It's, you know what, you use a lot of search terms to find everything.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's exactly it. State Senator Drew MacEwen here representing the 35th mightily here this session and into the future here. The legislative wrap up again, May 14th, Mason County Public Works. That's 100 Public Works Drive there just off the 101. Program starts at 8, but there is breakfast before that. Thank you, Drew, and we'll see you there
Sounds good. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
for sure.